This video is sponsored by Valda's Spire of Secrets, a new expansion for 5th edition D&D. More on that later. Hey Optimancers, Chris here. I've been ranking all the subclasses in D&D, and here's where we are so far. Link for this image is also in the video description. Last week we discussed the Ranger, which saw a wide range of rankings due to the greater degree of the final power of the subclass based on the subclass itself, which sees a large variance between subclasses like the Hunter or Monster Slayer and then the Gloomstalker. Today we're looking at rogues. One of the discussions I often end up in with players discussing the rogue is whether it should be considered a martial class. After all, other classes I would consider martial classes all gain the extra attack feature, and the rogue does not. However, by the way I define a martial class, the rogue certainly qualifies. It uses weapons rather than spells in combat, generally, and their class features, for the most part, support this style of combat. What I get told sometimes is that because the rogue has advantage to skill use, there opens like this third category of skill user, to which the rogue apparently uniquely qualifies. Though I would have to disagree, as this isn't unique to rogues at all. Bards have advantages to skill use that are comparable to what the rogue gets, but nobody is arguing they aren't primary spellcasters. Being strong in skill use definitely represents a mechanical advantage, and I will be taking that into account. And they may even play a role in combat, but in the end, the rogue is generally using weapons in combat to deliver damage without the aid of spells, so as far as I'm concerned, that makes the rogue a martial, albeit without the extra attack feature. If you would like to support the content on this channel, please check the link in the video description for my Patreon. Patrons of this channel receive rewards like early access to videos without the YouTube ads, and my top level patrons can join me and play some D&D every month. Today I'd like to recognize these top level patrons: Airhead, Alexander Razin, Rob Reichelt, Anna, Aurelio Christian, Awesomeface, Ben Potts, Benjamin, Black, Bloody Nine, and CJ. Thank you all so much for your support. Let's get started. The ranking system I'll be using for the rogue is the same as the ranking system I've used for all other videos to this point. And I'm about to go over that, so if you're familiar with this system, feel free to skip to the next portion of this video, which I've timestamped in the video timeline. So here is how it will work. I will not be discussing any subclass that is not official content. So subclasses that are third-party or playtest material are not included. This is a power ranking, so I'm not taking into account how well they are designed in this ranking or my personal preference. This will take into account how powerful they are as a single class build, as well as how powerful they are when multi-classed. I will be assuming feats are allowed and used, and that all the optional class features in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything are allowed as well. Just some things to note as well. Features are weighted by how soon they are received. A feature you get at level 3 is much more valuable than a feature you get at level 10, because these features see way more gameplay when you actually play the subclass. So this is not a comparison of which of these subclasses are more powerful at 20th level. I don't think that's very relevant to players. This is a comparison as to which you will find most powerful, assuming you are starting at low level and advancing levels through gameplay. A feature you have for 100% of that time is 5 times more valuable than a feature you're going to have for 20%. And although I will consider all 3 pillars of gameplay, I will be weighing the combat tier most heavily. The combat tier tends to be the tier that is most reliant on mechanics, and mechanics is what I'm looking at here. I also assume you will not be playing as a solo character. So features that work well with teammates, or even better, improve your teammates, will be considered in the ranking. Now before we begin, I'm going to address a couple common misconceptions before they come up. A bad feature does not make a subclass less powerful. I can add 10 terrible and practically useless features to the most powerful subclasses, and they're still the most powerful. I'm only looking at features that make a subclass better. Secondly, just because a feature can be replicated with a feat does not mean the feature isn't good. Feats are not free, and they can be very powerful. They can even be more powerful than a subclass feature. So, a feature that can be replicated by a good feat can still be a great feature, improving the power level of the subclass. And the person playing that subclass has one extra feat they can use on any of the many potent feats in the game. I guarantee you're not going to have enough feats, and having one more is a big benefit. These rankings, of course, are subjective, and I don't expect anyone to agree with them in their entirety. And I do have some personal biases, which will probably become apparent. I like spells. I think they can be very powerful. And that's going to be clear enough as we move forward. Also, I should say, I like to make my saving throws, and I don't care who knows it. Give me a way to do that more reliably, and I'm likely to consider a subclass more powerful because of it. Finally, I don't assume you will be limited to one encounter per day. I don't assume you will have short rests whenever you want. So features that can be used more often I consider to be more powerful than single-use ones. Now, this is a very common rating system in D&D for the ranking of classes and subclasses, and it includes anywhere from the S tier being the highest and the D tier being the lowest, and I will not be using it. Instead, I'll be using this expanded tier chart that includes an E and F tier. Here are the criteria I will be ranking the subclasses with. If I give a subclass an S tier ranking, I don't just think it's powerful. I think it's probably too powerful. I think there are some potentially game-breaking mechanics involved, and these are going to come into play without requiring high-level play at all. My issue with these subclasses is you have a real possibility of invalidating other player character features. This can lead to overshadowing other players, and so if you're a power gamer, these options are for you. If you aren't, I think I would think carefully before selecting an S-tier subclass. If I give a subclass an A-tier ranking, I think it's a very powerful option. Characters using an A-tier subclass are easy to optimize and have features that should be showstoppers in gameplay, stomping down challenges with abandon. We may not break the game, but we're definitely going to make it a fair bit easier. If I give a subclass a B-tier ranking, I think it's a good subclass. Optimizing a B-tier subclass should result in a very effective character that has a strong contribution to a party of characters. Even with limited optimization, a B-tier subclass is probably still going to be reasonably effective. If I give a subclass a C-tier ranking, I think it's a decent option. Optimizing a C-tier subclass may require a bit more thought about how to make the best use of the features, but they can still be quite effective if handled with some thought and consideration. If I give a subclass a D-tier ranking, I think it's serviceable. Optimizing a D-tier rank subclass will lead to a decent character that can usually still pull their weight, but I wouldn't expect to stand out. If I give a subclass an E-tier ranking, I think it's a weaker option. An E-tier subclass needs some extra effort to make a character that contributes effectively at all, or perhaps the contributions they make end up being extremely narrow, or rely heavily on other characters helping them out. It's still possible to make a character that can be somewhat effective with an E-tier subclass, but if you just play it as it's presented, you can probably expect a disappointing experience. If I give a subclass an F-tier ranking, I think it's basically unredeemable. An F-tier ranked subclass differentiates from an E-tier subclass because it is bound to disappoint, and there just aren't any good ways to optimize it to make it worthwhile. And the F-tier subclasses, along with the S-tier subclasses, I think can be a problem when considering a team of players because they create pretty overwhelming imbalance. Subclasses aren't balanced against each other, and that's normally okay. But when you have these extreme cases on either end, it can weaken the game. When subclasses receive the same rank, I will be placing subclasses I think are more potent, more to the left of the chart, with the weaker further to the right. So at the end of this series, I will have a comprehensive list from top to bottom of every class and subclass combination in the game, all 114 of them. So let's start with our base class features. Rogue has D8 hit points, and that's a bit below average for a martial class. Simple weapon proficiency, as well as hand crossbows, rapiers, longswords, and short swords. Proficiency in thieves' tools, of course. Dexterity and intelligence save proficiencies, and 4 skill proficiencies, which is the highest starting number in the game. Rogues start with light armor proficiency only. Now, assuming we're dexterity-based rogue, that means probably studded leather plus our dexterity modifier, which means a rogue can expect a lower armor class than other martial classes. We're probably talking about 15 once we get studded leather. Eventually, it might go up to 17 when we raise our dexterity to 20. So, combined with not great hit points, it leaves rogues quite a bit more vulnerable to enemy attacks than other classes. Now, if we go with strength on attacks, which we can do, then we really want heavy armor proficiency and maybe shield proficiency as well. To get this, then really our best option is to dip another class that gets these proficiencies first before multi-classing into rogue, though that does put a bit of strain on our ability scores. We can do it through feats as well, but that's pretty expensive. Working through medium armor proficiency is also a possibility. We can do that through a racial selection, though medium armor and no shield still leaves us maxed out at armor class 17, so we're not that much better off in the long run. And in the short run, we're talking probably +1 armor class. We also get 3 features at first level. Thieves can't. It's just a special method of communication used by rogues, basically a specialized language. This is what we call a ribbon feature, as in it's more about fleshing out the theme of the class than actual mechanical benefits. Then we get expertise. This provides 2 skills of our choice, or alternatively, we can choose 1 skill proficiency and our proficiency in thieves' tools is one of those selections. In either case, we get twice our proficiency bonus when we make an ability check for that skill or tool. Now, there have always been other ways to gain expertise, or features that are expertise in everything but name. Though with more expansions, it becomes even less unique. Bards get expertise, though not till 3rd level. Rangers can now actually access expertise at 1st level, and a number of subclasses provide this benefit as well as access through feats. Expertise is essentially a +2 bonus because we already have +2 and then we're adding +2 more, though it does scale with our level. In most campaigns, expect it to max out around +4. This is a pretty substantial bonus, allowing you to become truly elite in a skill or alternatively become quite good in a skill that isn't tied to an ability score that you specialize in. I often take expertise in perception with the rogue, and this allows my rogue's perception to be on par with a character that actually has wisdom as a primary ability score. Stealth is also a very common pick, and since chances are good that a rogue specializes in dexterity, this allows for a very strong stealth score. And last, but definitely not least, we get sneak attack. This is, without question, the premier and most iconic feature of the rogue. Sneak attack provides a bonus d6 damage to 1 weapon hit you make per turn with a ranged or finesse weapon, provided you have advantage on the attack or you have an ally within 5 feet of the enemy. The reason this is the premier feature is that it scales by a d6 every other level, meaning a 7th level rogue is adding 4d6 damage to a damage roll that qualifies for sneak attack. So ideally, with a rogue, we want to always qualify for sneak attack, provided we haven't already used it on that turn. One common misconception of this feature is that you can only use it once per round, but if we can make an off-turn attack with our reaction, we can qualify for sneak attack a second time, even if we already use sneak attack on our turn. When we can do this, it really spikes the damage capabilities of the class. The second misconception I see sometimes is the misconception that the weapon is going to be using dexterity as the ability score applied to hit and damage, and that is usually the case, but technically speaking, when we have a finesse weapon, we can choose to use dexterity, but we don't have to. So, if a barbarian rogue were to use a rapier, they could still use strength, allowing them to qualify for the rage damage bonuses, reckless attack, and also qualify for the sneak attack. In fact, the reckless attack would qualify you for sneak attack by granting advantage, and you would still get the sneak attack bonus. The way sneak attack generally works, it provides a rogue a more linear damage boost than extra attacks that other martial classes are getting, or the various damage boosts that are often provided at 11th level. This tends to have rogues mechanically operate best right before levels 5 and 11th level, then worse at those levels in comparison to other martial classes, at least in terms of delivering damage. One definite disadvantage to sneak attack is it often limits your target selection. So, for example, if you have two potential targets, but only one of them has an ally within 5 feet of them, then you either select that target or forfeit your sneak attack, even if the other target would have been the preferable option otherwise. Overall though, sneak attack is obviously a really strong feature, and without it, rogues would be just awful. At 2nd level, rogues get cunning action. This provides them the ability to take the dash, disengage, or hide actions as bonus actions. This is really good. There's no limited resource pool we're drawing from, so a 2nd level rogue tends to be able to move further and move more freely than other classes, and they can hide every turn if they have the terrain to do so, which can give them advantage on their attacks, as well as prevent them being targeted by enemy attacks. So this is a good ability, there's no question. At 3rd level, rogues access their only optional class feature, which is Steady Aim. This allows the rogue to use their bonus action to set up advantage on their next attack in the same turn. If they use this, they can't move at all on their turn. So the advantage here is you can basically always set up your sneak attack by getting advantage on the attack roll, but you are giving up your maneuverability to do so. I find rogues will use this fairly often, and it's pretty effective. Then at level 3, the rogue picks their subclass. They get at least 2 features right away. 2 is kind of the standard, then another at 9th, 13th, and 17th level. So right off, I should say that these additional subclass features are gained really late. Waiting until level 9 for your second subclass feature is a long wait. The 13th and 17th level features are unlikely to see gameplay at all. And now if we're looking at other martial classes, like fighters or paladins or rangers, they're all getting their second subclass feature 2 whole levels earlier. So when I'm looking at these subclasses, that's a factor. The 3rd level feature or features become a lot more relevant than the next feature, even more so than we'll see with subclasses from other classes. And those high level features, they just really aren't relevant for this rating system. At level 4, we get our ability score improvement. Rogues gain ability score improvements at the standard 4, 8, 12, 16, 19 progression, except they do get 1 additional increase at 10th level. Now that is pretty late, but it's still going to be relevant in most games. At 5th level, we get an uncanny dodge. This provides the rogue a reaction to reduce some of the damage they take in combat. This really does help. As we've already discussed, the rogue's defense leaves a lot to be desired, so any way to reduce damage does make a difference. Though using this feature eats up your reaction, and it only reduces the damage from a single attack. Still, it's helpful to have the option. At 6th level, we gain expertise in 2 more skills, or 1 skill and thieves tools. So I kind of already discussed this. Not a unique feature for rogues, but good to have. At level 7, we get evasion, which provides additional defense against effects that provide a dexterity save for half damage. We take no damage on a successful save or half damage if we fail the saving throw. This does make a big difference against these kinds of effects. Though I will say in most battles it's not going to come up. At 11th level we get what is arguably the biggest boost to the rogue's ability to use skills. This provides a minimum of 10 on our d20 roll when we make an ability check that adds our proficiency bonus, which basically means if we're proficient in a skill, we're going to succeed on the check. Because if you think about it, if we're proficient in a skill, which now has +4 from proficiency alone, and in a few cases it's a +8 because of expertise, plus our ability score bonus, then we're looking at probably a minimum of 20 or so on any skill check we make. So like I said, I would expect to succeed on pretty much any skill check I made if I was proficient in the skill by 11th level. Though I will point out this comes on pretty late, and I'll also point out, at least with the things we're experts in, we're probably not failing those checks very often anyways. And then everything else the rogue gets is coming on late enough that I don't think it's much of a factor in the average campaign. So overall, I think the rogue chassis struggles, to be honest. Defensively, it is one of the weakest martial classes. And offensively, sneak attack, it really does help. And there are points where sneak attack is really good in comparison, particularly right before 5th and 11th level. But a lack of a fighting style and extra attack then just push us back, leaving our damage potential overall okay. A rogue tends to do acceptable amounts of damage on average, but usually not to a point where it really stands out, like some builds can do. Now, a rogue, yes, they are good at skills. There's just no question. Though I do question how powerful that is compared to other class features, and again, not really unique to rogues. There are also no spells to round out these features like we see with the Ranger or the Paladin, and that really hurts too. Fighters in comparison have the same drawback, but they bring more to the table, both offensively and defensively. So the rogue chassis I consider one of the weaker ones. Now, that's not to say it's unredeemable, and I do think sneak attack does make it so you can make a rogue that can contribute effectively to damage output, but not dramatically as some other classes can. You are good at skills, though not uniquely so. And some players may put more value on that than I do. Though I do think it's a good thing to have, I just don't think it's a dramatic thing. Now I will say the rogue multiclasses decently. It's easy to qualify for, you can get some of the skill boosts right away, and sneak attack meshes decently with most other classes. Cunning action is a strong feature that can be a good boost on most characters if you're willing to invest 2 levels. So I think for a rogue to be an effective character, there needs to be a multiclass with something strong, or we need a good subclass. So let's look at those subclasses and see what the rogue offers. But first, Valda's Spire of Secrets is a new expansion for D&D 5th edition that introduces 10 new base classes and over 150 new subclasses, 380 pages of content to enhance your D&D game. I've had a chance to go through Spire of Secrets, and I just want to share some of my personal favorites of the options. My favorite new race is the Mandrake. They're like this plant-like creatures, and there's just some really cool stuff there. They can cast Shillelagh on themselves, and then they can use their own limbs as the Shillelagh, and they can grow good berries, like the spell. Then you get a subrace that's seasonally based. My favorite is Summer. This provides the Deep Roots feature that provides advantage to saving throws and ability checks to avoid being moved against your will. My favorite class? No contest. The Alchemist actually provides us an Alchemist that works. If you've been watching this series, you know my opinion on the Artificer subclass. But this is a full Alchemist class that can actually do cool and useful things in combat. I get asked all the time when I talk about the Alchemist and its problems, what I would suggest to make it work, because people, and me included, really like the idea of the Alchemist. Well, right here, this is my answer. Without going into detail, this Alchemist works. Now this is just a tiny taste of the options in this new book. It is really quite big. So check out Spire of Secrets today. You can find a link to get your copy in the video description or on the pinned comment of this video. So the first subclass we're going to talk about is the Arcane Trickster. This is one of the original subclasses available to Rogue in the Player's Handbook. At 3rd level we get 2 features, but the first is the ability to cast spells, which is very nice. We get 3 cantrips, one of which is automatically Mage Hand, and then we choose 3 first level spells, 2 of which must be from the Enchantment and Illusion schools. All these spells must be from the Wizard spell list, but that's a big list. As we increase in levels, the spellcasting advances very slowly. 2nd level spells come on at 7th level, and honestly that might be as high as we get in the average campaign. I will say the rogue can really benefit from this though. Mirror image is an illusion and amazing on a rogue. It really boosts our defense, which, let's be honest, needed it. Furthermore, mirror image is a good way to get some reaction attacks that are off turn to maybe get another sneak attack. Let me just go a bit in detail how that works. So if we look at the mirror image spell, we can see here it says each time a creature targets you with an attack during the spell's duration, roll a d20 to determine whether the attack instead targets one of your duplicates. So if the mirror image works, then the enemy targets one of your duplicates instead of you. And then the Sentinel feat says, when a creature within 5 feet of you makes an attack against a target other than you, like our mirror image, you can use your reaction to make a melee weapon attack against the attacking creature. So the idea is, the enemy comes in, attempts to attack you, you roll your d20 on the mirror image, they target the mirror image instead. Because they're targeting something other than us, we can now make a reaction attack against them and potentially get a second sneak attack on our round. But right from 3rd level, we can get Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade. These are nice on a rogue because we're not getting extra attack anyways. Though they do require melee attacks, and that is significant. Another option is Minor Illusion, which can give us Obscurement. This might provide us a hide option, which can work well with our cunning action. Our school limitation does hurt though, because, I would love to get Find Familiar and Shield on a rogue, and we just can't get them both. Shield, of course, can really boost our defense, and it's going to be a better reaction defensively a lot of the time than Uncanny Dodge, which only works against one attack. Find Familiar can be huge though. Our familiar can be the ally we need within 5 feet of an enemy to trigger sneak attack. Plus, it can provide us additional freedom of target selection. A familiar can also provide the help action, which can also trigger sneak attack and give a significant offensive boost as well. Never mind all the out-of-combat uses of Find Familiar. Now, we do have some decent options for our school limited selections, though nothing that I would normally take over Shield or Find Familiar, at least with 1st level spells, if given that option. Our casting ability score is Intelligence, and there are some spells we'll select where that doesn't matter. But there are other spells we're going to be selecting where it does. So we probably need at least a decent intelligence score, though there is no way I would prioritize it over dexterity. So this is just a really, really good feature, especially for the rogue because we can really shore up some weaknesses. This in no way makes us comparable to a full spellcaster in casting, not even close. Not even close really to a ranger or a paladin. But in regards to those two classes, this does bridge that gap to at least a reasonable degree. The second feature we get at 3rd level is Mage Hand Legerdemain, which boosts our Mage Hand cantrip. This allows us to use our Mage Hand to stow or retrieve objects, which we can do without notice if we make our sleight of hand check. We can also use Thieves' Tools with our Mage Hand, which is a helpful way to avoid some potential traps. All of these things can be done with a bonus action, which can provide for some potential combat use. Though, if stealing is your goal, this is quite nice for that. You can make your Mage Hand invisible, and if you concentrate on sleight of hand, your chance of success is going to be very high. Also, Mage Hand is not concentration, so we can have our Mage Hand active and still concentrate on other spells. Mage Hand does require an action to cast though, and the duration isn't long, so I wouldn't necessarily expect it to be active when most combats start. Our 9th level feature is Magical Ambush. This causes disadvantage on a saving throw by a creature targeted by one of our spells if we're hidden when we cast a spell. Remember that we can use Cunning Action to hide as a bonus action, meaning we can hide and then cast a spell in the same turn. Now let's talk about some downsides of this feature. Remember, our spell DC probably isn't as high as a dedicated spellcaster since we're focusing on dexterity rather than intelligence. But even a bigger factor is our spellcasting itself, which has us limited to really low level spells, and we don't have a lot of slots either. Still, if we cause disadvantage to the saving throw, then, something like Tasha's Hideous Laughter, for example, I would expect the chance of the spell sticking to be pretty good. So this will allow us to make better use of some spells that might not have been overly reliable otherwise. Technically speaking, this does cause disadvantage on all creatures as spell targets, so if we do have some multi-target spells, then they get greater value. But again, our low spell progression plays a big factor here. Spells like Hypnotic Pattern could be really boosted, but we're looking at levels we just likely won't achieve in most campaigns. Still, a pretty good feature because it does give our limited spellcasting a decent boost, and allow some spells that would be iffy to gamble on a much better chance of success. So that is the Arcane Trickster. Spells really helpful here, both for offense and defense. You take the Rogue Chassis, add Find Familiar, Booming Blade, Minor Illusion, Mirror Image, you see a really significant increase in potential. Still, I wouldn't expect to be a big standout amongst your party members, but you can definitely contribute effectively, both in and out of combat. We're at a solid C here. It's perfectly viable, but not overwhelmingly powerful. Our next subclass is the Assassin, one of the other subclasses that was an original in the player's handbook. At 3rd level, we get proficiencies in a couple of toolkits. This isn't really a big deal. I mean, both these kits are good for rogues, but we could have proficiency in them anyways if we wanted to. Then we get Assassinate. This, honestly, it's the premier feature for an Assassin. If somebody goes into Assassin, it's usually to get this. This provides advantage on attack rolls against any creature that hasn't taken a turn in combat, and if we've surprised a creature and beat it in initiative, any hit we score is automatically a critical, and sneak attack does work very nicely in combination with critical hits. The reason I said you need to have surprise and win initiative is once a creature comes up in the initiative order, even if it was surprised, it's not surprised anymore, at least technically not, even if we're still on the first turn of combat. So to get those sweet criticals, you need both surprise and winning initiative. Still, in my experience, most combats just aren't with surprise. Now, if you really focus on trying to get surprise, you can increase the quantity, but a lot of combats just do not have the opportunity at all. In which case, we can still benefit by winning initiative to get advantage on our first attacks, but we're still talking about advantage on the first round only, which is okay, but it's definitely not huge. Overall, this is a fairly decent feature. I do think a lot of players overestimate their ability to create surprise in combat if they're playing a stealthy character, but it's not just about how good your stealth roll is. In my experience, in most situations, when we have a combat, surprise was never a possibility. So most of the time, this is potentially advantage on one turn of attacks. Our chance of winning initiative should be decent. After all, we are likely focused on dexterity, but it's not certain, so in some combats, even the advantage won't come up. I think this ability is okay, but I think it does get overrated. But in my opinion at least, I think it's decent. I don't think it's bad. At level 9, we get Infiltration Expertise. This is an out-of-combat feature that is so circumstantial, I wouldn't expect it to come up at all in most campaigns. It's an ability to take on a new persona, but it requires 7 days to set up. So even in a campaign where such an ability could be relevant, often the time frame is still going to render this useless. So I just don't think this ends up boosting our Assassin at all. And that's the Assassin. We're getting basically a ribbon feature at level 3 and then one decent feature. And that's really about it, because at 9th level we don't get much at all. Then we're adding this onto a chassis that isn't all that impressive. But I do think an Assassin can contribute. Those times where you do get surprise, they can be pretty effective. Other than that, they're going to be okay for damage. I mean, pretty good on round 1 of some combats, though remember, a rogue can get advantage anyways using steady aim, and the Assassin isn't offering a lot for defense. They get some skill use, and that's about it. This ends up, to me, being somewhere between D and E. And frankly, I do think it ends up being on the stronger side of E. It is one of the weaker subclasses in this game. but there are weaker subclasses out there. Oh, speaking of which, next up is the Inquisitive. This was published in Xanathar's Guide to Everything. At 3rd level, we get 3 features, but 2 of them are really small. Ear for Deceit provides a minimum d20 roll of 8 when making insight checks to determine honesty. It is pretty strange. It's not a minimum of 10 like most features of this kind. And we're talking about one specific use of one specific skill tied to an ability score that isn't going to be our highest. So this, again, just basically ribbon. Eye for Detail provides us the ability to use perception to spot hidden creatures or investigation checks to uncover clues as a bonus action. Now, I wouldn't expect the investigation check to come in combat at all. So, who cares if it's a bonus action? It could be an action, it could be a bonus action. If you're outside of combat, it makes no difference. As for spotting hidden creatures, again, this isn't advantage, it's a bonus action. So combat needs to have already started for this to come up at all. In which case, spotting hidden creatures, the main value of that, has already passed. Now, if this gave a bonus to spot hidden creatures, then it might avoid surprise or that kind of thing. But this gives us no bonus on that at all, because whether it's an action or a bonus action makes no difference. Again, this is a very small boost at best. So at 3rd level, we are relying on what I guess is our main feature, and that's Insightful Fighting. This allows us to use our bonus action to potentially set up a sneak attack if we beat the target in an opposed skill check of Insight versus Deception. Now, I would expect, given we likely put expertise in Insight if we're going this way, for this to succeed, almost all the time. Still, I think this feature is bad. Rogues can get advantage with a bonus action using steady aim or hiding with a cunning action. Now, there may be restrictions on movement or terrain, but in most cases, either of those will do the job better than this, because advantage will give us the sneak attack and make us more likely to hit. Or, if we could range an ally within 5 feet, then we get sneak attack without using our bonus action at all, and there's no opposed skill check. And the rare circumstances where this is our best option, it's still not guaranteed to work. But I think those circumstances are just ridiculously rare. A rogue should be able to get sneak attack on their attacks. Now, I need to mention this because a friend actually approached me a few weeks ago to specifically talk about this feature, and they wanted to provide their feedback to me that they had found this feature very useful. And I promised them I would share their opinion here. So there you go. There is at least one testimonial of a player that I know personally who found value with this feature. Personally, I don't share his opinion. In my opinion, this is a weak feature. So the Inquisitive, I just don't think it offers you anything really good at level 3. Then at level 9, we get Steady Eye, which gives advantage on wisdom perception checks or intelligence investigation checks if you move no more than half your speed on your turn. So this might prevent you from being surprised. It will also help for searching for traps. Investigation and perception are skills that both come up, especially for rogues. And this will improve your chance of success. Though I have to point out here that Reliable Talent is just 2 levels away, at which point you're likely never failing either of these checks anyways. Reliable Talent isn't boosting your passive scores though, so this should increase those passive scores by 5 each if you are moving at half speed. So that is something. Honestly, this is okay, but circumstantial advantage on 2 skills isn't a big deal for a 9th level feature, especially when it's basically going to be obsolete in 2 more levels. And so I think the Inquisitive really struggles. Despite my friend's testimonial to the opposite, I don't see much here at level 3. And level 9 I think is a pretty small boost. Then you put this on a weak chassis, and I'm afraid this just barely squeaks an E in my opinion. I mean, I give it an E because you can still technically provide okay damage through sneak attack, and you have the skills. but that is pretty much it. Not a completely worthless character if it's built well, but frankly, I would just expect you to struggle. Next up is the Mastermind. This was first published in the Sword Coast Adventures Guide and reprinted in Xanathar's Guide to Everything. At 3rd level, we get 2 features. The first is Master of Intrigue. This gives us a few toolkits, 2 languages, and gives you the ability to mimic speech patterns of a creature you hear speaking for at least 1 minute. This, it's not bad. I mean, 3 tools, 2 languages, that's not that big a deal, honestly. Though it is a fair number, but the mimicry, I think, could be circumstantially useful. The other feature is Master of Tactics. This allows us to use the help action as a bonus action. And when we're using the help action to provide advantage to an attack roll, which, let's face it, that's how you're likely going to use this, then the target of the attack need only be within 30 feet of you rather than you being right next to it. So this can be pretty decent. It really depends. If you have a party member who can really take advantage of this, like, maybe another rogue, or a sharpshooter with great weapon master, a bonus action for advantage once might be a decent trade-off. I don't think this is going to be dramatic though, and it is using up our bonus action. So it prevents steady aim or cunning action. So the bonus action cost here is far from free. Still, I think this can be okay. It really depends. Then at 9th level, we get Insightful Manipulator, which honestly I am not a fan of. You need to observe a creature for a minute, and then you can compare a single characteristic to your own. This is really limited in what it tells you. And it's also circumstantial because of the time requirement. The DM may also provide you with a bit of history of the creature or a personality trait, which again is really circumstantial, though in the right situation that could be helpful. But most of the time, this is a full minute you need to observe a potential, probably enemy, right? And we can just get such a small piece of information. Overall, I think it's just a weak feature. Very circumstantial use, and even at those circumstances, I think the value here is super limited. And that's the Mastermind. In the right kind of campaign, some of these features will be somewhat useful. But in most campaigns, we're really talking about a bonus action help feature, which is so-so. I think the Mastermind does fare better than the Inquisitive, but not by a lot. I still think this ranks E, though it's stronger than the Inquisitive, but I think it's still weaker than the Assassin. Phantom is up next. This is one of our newer rogue subclasses from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. We get 2 features at level 3. The first is Whispers of the Dead, which provides us with a skill or tool proficiency of our choice. The interesting thing here is we can change that proficiency after a short or long rest, so we have this floating proficiency that will eventually qualify for a reliable talent, meaning that, in theory, we could apply a reliable talent to any skill in the game. But let's just keep this in perspective. It's a proficiency, so it's okay. Wails from the Grave is our other 3rd level feature. This provides us with a limited ability to enhance our sneak attack by doing some damage to a second target. We can do this a number of times equal to our proficiency bonus per long rest. And when we hit a creature with a sneak attack, we can select a second creature within 30 feet of the initial target, and that second creature takes half as many sneak attack dice, rounded up, in damage. So if we're talking about level 3, then we're talking about 1 die of damage, twice per day, so 7 points of damage on average per long rest. That's not a lot, really. This does scale, though, so at 5th level, we're talking about 2 dice 3 times per day, so 21 points of damage on average, and by level 9, it's 42 points of damage on average. Because basically what's happening here is we're scaling twice, once from our sneak attack dice and another from our proficiency bonus. Now, this is not a dramatic amount of damage when you consider it spread out over a whole day, but the scaling is good enough that it's always decent. Often increased damage options don't scale well. This one does scale fairly well. At level 9, we get Tokens of the Departed. Now this is a good feature. When a creature dies within 30 feet of us, we can use our reaction to create a soul trinket. We actually have technically no limit on the number we can create, though we can never have more at one time than our proficiency bonus. We can use the trinkets to get extra uses of our Whales from the Grave 3rd level feature, so this could potentially be a lot more uses, and this is likely what we're using the trinkets on. Now, it really depends. It's hard to say how many additional Whales of the Grave we're going to be able to use per day, but it easily has the potential to double it or more. We can also use them to basically get a limited Speak with the Dead with the creature for which the token was created. And we want to keep at least one token on our person unused. And then we get advantage on death saving throws and constitution saving throws. So that's quite nice. Con saves are probably the most common saving throw in D&D. So getting advantage on them, just good. So this is a really sweet 9th level feature. It's probably the best 9th level feature for any rogue subclass, period. So what we get are a couple features at 3rd level. They're not bad. And then we get an awesome feature at 9th level. But remember though, 9th level, as I mentioned, that's a little later than it is for most subclasses to get their second feature. So we weigh it a little bit less. But overall, I think Phantoms do fairly well in regards to rogues. I don't think it's as strong as Arcane Trickster. But you know what? I do think it's comparable. And I think they also rank a C, but they are lower down than the Arcane Trickster. Next up is the Scout. We saw this in Xanathar's Guide to Everything. We get 2 features at 2nd level. The first is Skirmisher. This allows us a reaction where we can move half our speed when an enemy ends its turn within 5 feet of us. And this movement does not provoke opportunity attacks. In terms of mobility, this is pretty useful. It does use our reaction though, and that really is an issue. If you think about it this way, if an enemy ends its turn within 5 feet of us, then it probably just finished attacking us. And if it hit, and we've achieved 5th level, then suddenly we have to choose between using Uncanny Dodge to reduce the damage, or this. And that may be a tough decision to make. Now, we could disengage on our turn as a bonus action using Cunning Action. But if we use this instead, it may help us keep that enemy from closing again, because we can apply extra distance. Never mind keeping our bonus action available for other uses, like Cunning Action, for example. So this is okay. I think if you are a ranged rogue, this is especially helpful to keep enemies at a distance. But if you are a melee rogue, it's also potentially helpful for skirmishing, as the name implies. This is not a powerful feature though, but it's okay as a mobility boost. The second 3rd level feature is Survivalist, which gives us proficiency and expertise in 2 skills. So nothing wrong with that. The skills are Nature and Survival, so we get a bit of a rangery feel there. Proficiency plus expertise in 2 skills, pretty solid. Thematically, I think this feature is unfortunate, since to get the full benefit here, we have to not take these skills at level 1. So basically we go from being not outdoorsy at all to a full out expert at level 3. But in terms of mechanics, this is a solid boost. Then at 9th level, we get another mobility boost with the app named Superior Mobility. We get an increase to our walking speed by 10 feet, as well as a boost to any existing climbing or swimming speeds by the same amount. Now, if you're thinking that Rogue and Ranger multiclass, well, I agree. But if you are thinking that Rangers get a swimming and climbing speed, I'll just remind you that this combination would require 15 levels. So I wouldn't be counting on getting that going. Still, the walking speed alone is decent. And remember, with Cunning Action, you can dash as a bonus action, which will increase this as well. If you do want to get a bonus to swimming or climbing, remember you can get these movement types with a racial selection. So the Scout offers a couple decent mobility boosts and a couple skills with expertise. Defensively, the mobility can be used to make you less of a target, which is helpful for the squishy rogue. So, a Scout can come together okay. It is not one of your stronger rogue options, but if you are looking for your rogue to be mobile, this is the best option. So, in terms of power, Scout can do okay offensively through rogue, then passable defensively through mobility, and is stronger at skills than most rogues. So I think we end up with a D. This isn't one of the more powerful rogues, but it's not one of the least powerful rogues either. Next up is the Soulknife, which is the other rogue subclass from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. We start out third level with 2 features. Our first feature is Psionic Power. We get a number of psionic energy dice equal to twice our proficiency bonus. This does not matter, since you will almost never use them all up. I won't go through all the mechanics right now, but basically it would be almost a challenge to use up all these dice. In fact, I've seen these played where the players try to challenge themselves to use up all the dice and often fail. So if you are used to playing in a way where you conserve your limited resources, you almost need to adjust to a new paradigm when playing a Soulknife, because this is barely limited features at all. We basically get 2 things here. The first, we can use our psionic energy die to add a d6 to any ability check with a skill or tool if the original check would otherwise fail, potentially turning that failure into a success. So I recommend basically you do this all the time when you fail any of these checks. Like I said, you won't run out of dice, so basically it's a d6 patch any time you fail. The die type increases with level, so it becomes a d8 by level 5, and eventually a d12 at super high level. Secondly, we can set up telepathic communication with a number of creatures equal to our proficiency bonus for a number of hours equal to the roll of the psionic die. And this telepathic communication extends to a range of 1 mile, and this is one of those types of telepathy that doesn't require a common language. So you can basically use this in place of a tongue spell. Again, you can use this freely. Feel free. Your dice are not going to run out. So this is a really good feature. Again, you don't expect to run out of this resource, so it's a bonus to all your skill and tool checks and a pretty good telepathy ability all wrapped into one feature. The second feature we get at level 3 is Psychic Blades. This allows us an option with our attack action to use psychic weapons instead of our physical ones. If we do that, we can attack with our bonus action as well, and we add our dexterity bonus, or, technically our strength bonus if we prefer, to both attack and damage for both attacks. We can throw the blades with 60-foot range, no range penalty, and the base weapon does a d6 damage, and the bonus action weapon is a d4, and the damage is psychic. This is a nice feature as well. We can make ranged attacks with a bonus action attack without taking the crossbow expert feat, or melee attacks without taking 2-weapon fighting style. The damage type is fairly reliable, and it's another option if we're lacking magic weapons and facing resistance. And of course, they give us another option if, for any reason, we are without weapons at all. Generally, I don't expect that to come up often, but it's there. Now, we can't use these for reaction attacks, so keep that in mind if you're going to be a rogue that specializes in trying to get that off-turn attack. And if we get a good magical weapon, that is often going to be the better option. So I think this has less value as we increase in levels, assuming we are getting magical weapons. But at 3rd level, this should be a solid offensive increase, especially if we're playing a ranged rogue, and it gives us some range versatility. Then at level 9, we get Soul Blades, which gives us 2 more uses for our psionic energy dice. And once we add these options, now we can use up our psionic energy dice. The first one, Homing Strikes, which allows us to use a psionic die to add to an attack roll with our psychic blades that otherwise would have missed. And then we can potentially turn that miss into a hit. Now, this is the first feature that can totally use up these dice. But this only expends a die if the modified roll is a hit, which at this point are 8 per long rest, plus an additional die every short rest. So imagine just using dice on this. That would be at least 8 misses turned into hits. That would be a lot of damage, especially if they were sneak attacks. Now, you won't necessarily get that many opportunities, because we're talking about missing in the first place, then the die turning that miss into a hit, and how many times is that happening every long rest? I don't know. But offensively, this is going to be substantial. The other option is we can expend 1 die and a bonus action to teleport a number of feet equal to 10 times what we roll on the die. So it's a multi-use bonus action teleport. Though the maximum range is random, a lot of times when we need to teleport though, 10 feet does the trick. So at 9th level, for the first time, we really need to keep track of those dice, as we have now enough good options to use them all up. Though still, these features tend not to use the die unless the roll succeeds. So these dice are going to go a long way. So the Soulknife is pretty good. If you were looking for a melee rogue using Booming Blade and hopefully getting some reaction attacks, then this is not the subclass you were looking for. If you are looking for a rogue subclass that doesn't care about being at melee or range, gets bonus action attacks, skill boosting, telepathy, can turn misses into hits, and make bonus action teleports, then this is the one you want. Frankly, I still think the Arcane Trickster is slightly ahead because spells are that good. But this subclass is as close as any to that. Perfectly viable if you're looking to play a rogue, and frankly, I think it's pretty user-friendly as well. The next rogue is the Swashbuckler. This subclass was introduced in the Sword Coast Adventures Guide, then reprinted in Xanathar's Guide to Everything. We get 2 starting features at 3rd level. Our first is Fancy Footwork. This provides the rogue the ability to move away from the target they made a melee attack against on their turn without provoking an opportunity attack. So this is like one of the aspects of the mobile feat, and a nice opportunity for a rogue to use 2-weapon fighting without stressing about not being able to use cutting action for disengage. If you want to pop in, make melee attacks, then pop out, then this works well. Also, this can work pretty well with the Booming Blade cantrip, because if we move in, Booming Blade, and move out, and they come to follow us, they would trigger that secondary damage. Our second feature is Rakish Audacity, which firstly provides a bonus to our initiative equal to our charisma bonus. Honestly, a good charisma bonus is a pretty big ask for most rogues though. Secondly, we can basically get a sneak attack against any creature we make a melee attack against, as long as we don't have disadvantage on the attack roll. Unlike the Inquisitive, this doesn't require any check or bonus action. The only requirement is we're making melee attacks. So both of these features are solid enough, but they both pretty much pigeonhole our rogue into melee combat, which honestly is a bit of a problem, because melee classes do a lot better if they have good armor class and good hit points, and we have neither. Slipping into melee and back out can work sometimes. Sometimes they're just going to follow you and you're going to get slaughtered. If a melee rogue is not what you're looking for, keep looking. But if you are looking to melee with your rogue, these are some solid features. At 9th level, we get Panache, which technically operates a bit like what Ancestral Guardian Barbarians, Cavaliers, and Armorers can do, except this isn't an attack, it uses our action. It has a contested ability check, and it's gained 6 levels later. And most importantly, it turns our rogue into the tank, except without the armor class or hit points. So yeah, yikes. I guess we could throw this on an enemy and run like hell, but as soon as any of our companions attack it or cast a spell at it, the feature stops working. Also, if we get more than 60 feet away, it stops working. Without some kind of clever multi-class build, I think this is just not good. I mean, rogues are one of the worst candidates for a tank ever. Now, there is a second use here to charm a target that isn't hostile to you, so there's some utility, I suppose, but less than we can get with a first level spell. So Panache is not great. There are some ways to make it work okay with some multi-classing, but it's already a 9th level feature, straight classed. This comes on really late, and it's just on the wrong class. I totally see thematically what they were going for here, but mechanically, I do not think this is going to work very well at all. So we get some decent 3rd level features and a not so great 9th level feature. Swashbuckler is still a decent choice if melee is the way you want to go with your rogue, though melee is a dangerous place to be when you are that squishy. So I think this ranks D, right ahead of the Scout. With some careful planning, I think it can work fairly well, but the danger level here is high. Our final rogue subclass is the Thief. This is the last of the Player's Handbook subclasses for the rogue, and probably the most iconic of the rogues. At 3rd level, we get the standard 2 features. The First is fast hands. This allows us to use a bonus action to do sleight of hand checks, use thieves' tools, disarm a trap, or open a lock, or use the object action. So first off, sleight of hand, using thieves' tools, disarming traps, or opening locks. These are things usually done outside of combat. So I'm not sure how making them a bonus action really does anything at all. I mean, I guess if you wanted to do them in combat for some reason, it would make a difference, but I'm not sure why you would. Now, use an object is another matter. The use an object action is defined as when an object requires your action for its use, you take the use an object action. So this means that things that are normally actions like applying poison to a weapon or spreading caltrops can be done by a thief using a bonus action. According to the designers, this does not cover drinking a potion, however, nor can it be used to activate a magic item. Still, I guess there are some small benefits here. I could see some value in dropping some caltrops as a bonus action, but still, we are talking about a pretty small number of options here, and I'm not convinced they're superior options to using steady aim or cunning action. So this one, frankly, I find a bit disappointing. Our second feature is second story work. This allows you to climb without requiring extra movement and allows you to make running jumps with a number of extra feet equal to your dexterity modifier. So in regards to climbing, this isn't spider climbing or anything, so you still can or can't climb the same surfaces as without this subclass, only you do it a bit faster. I really struggle to see a regular use for this. I mean, if we are outside of combat, usually our speed at climbing isn't important. And if we are in combat, then, maybe useful once in a while, depending on the terrain. I just don't see it coming up very often. The jump distance thing, honestly, it's not great either. Normally we're using our strength score for the distance of our running jumps. So in our case, let's be honest, probably 8 feet. Then we add what? Another 3 feet, so 11 feet instead of 8? I could see that coming up. Maybe once in the campaign or so. Note that strength-based characters are still going to be jumping a lot further than we will. If this feature allowed us to use dexterity instead of strength, now that would be a significant increase. But since it's our modifier for dexterity added to our strength score, it's just not going to be a whole lot further, and it's never going to be a huge jump. I just don't think Thief offers much at third level. Using an object as a bonus action has some value. The rest is either not going to come up at all, like disarming traps as a bonus action, or very little, like a modest running jump distance increase. At level 9, we add Supreme Sneak. This provides us advantage on stealth checks as long as we're moving no more than half our speed. So, we're a rogue, we're talking stealth, so this sounds great. But how great is it really? I mean, compare this to the third level Soulknife feature that is adding what will be a mechanically comparable bonus to any skill check without a movement penalty. And that's just a segment of what they get at third level. This is a 9th level feature and it's all we get. Also, and I've mentioned this before with the 9th level features that boost skill use, reliable talent is really just around the corner. And assuming you're a dexterity-based rogue with, let's face it, expertise in stealth, then we're already looking likely at a bonus of plus 12 or so on stealth, so like a 13 if we roll a 1. Then, once reliable talent comes into play, a minimum of 22 result on a stealth check, meaning we're going to be making all our stealth checks without advantage required. So at that point, this is basically obsolete. So I think there is some benefit here when we get this at 9th, though I would expect to have made those stealth checks anyways. My level 11, I don't think this does anything for us anymore. Now, before I submit the final rating for Thief, I do need to say that if you are playing super high level, the 13th and 17th level features for Thief are dramatically better than what we've seen at the levels that are far more likely to see play, in my opinion. But this comparison is based on the levels of play I would expect most campaigns to see, which is first level to maybe 12th level. And if that's what we're playing and you pick Thief, you get all their crappy stuff and none of their good stuff. So that is why Thief ends up being an E. I don't think it's the worst of the rogue subclasses, but it is one of the weaker ones. The thief is dramatic in that it starts dramatically bad and ends dramatically good, but that good stuff just comes on too late. And so this is our list. We have Arcane Trickster, one of the original subclasses for Rogue that I still think is the best subclass for Rogue. But Soulknife and Phantom, which are our two newest subclasses for Rogue, I think are right in the running. Then we go down a level, and we're looking at the Swashbuckler and Scout. We have some decent features here. Scout is good at mobility. Swashbuckler is good at melee, but I think there are just some gaps there. And then we have our subclasses that don't work that well. Assassin probably being the strongest of them, though it doesn't remain the strongest of them if you do go to high levels. But Assassinate is okay. And then the Thief, and using an object as a bonus action is okay. Then we have Mastermind. I don't see a lot of use for that bonus action, help action, to be honest. And then the Inquisitive, which I think really just doesn't do much on any level. The reason why none of these end up being an F is I think Sneak Attack is strong enough of a feature that a rogue can at least deliver okay damage if you concentrate on that. And here is our total ranking so far. And as we can see, the rogue, a little bit below average, though not the worst by far. In our next segment, we're going to be talking about sorcerers, so I hope you'll join me for that. Otherwise, until next time, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everybody, and I will talk to you soon.